Let's talk about hate thy neighbour. Hate thy neighbour is an interesting concept. Donald Trump of the United States of America appears to be following that principle with his treatment of Mexicans, Canadians, assorted Mesoamericans, and South Americans in particular. In particular, when it relates to people from Venezuela fleeing Maduro. That man is exercising the principle, hate thy neighbour. The thing about racism and sexism is that it's an excuse made by narcissistic men with toxic entitlement who were socially conditioned to believe a lot of hogwash and use it as excuses for bad behaviour. Another example of hate thy neighbour is as follows. Shortly after moving into these premises, this physical body advised one of the neighbours in the facility that they were apologetic for being a bit tetchy, and it was due to grief. Explained that they had lost a relative who was only 15 years old in a motorcycle accident, as well as a stepmother and an ex-husband. Now, we haven't got confirmation about the ex-husband, but it appears that might have happened about 7 years ago. Don't ask how that's known, but it was found out. If that's not true, apologies to his family. However, what responded in the hate thy neighbour principle was as follows. A week after that, and by the way, this shouldn't matter, but it does. A week after that, he came up unannounced to this physical body, and he said that and by the way, that man has never left the town of Whoop Whoop that this is all happening in. He was born, raised there, never left, and so you can rule out Kalgoorlie. He said that the boy in Kalgoorlie had it coming because the bike was stolen, and that he had defended people in the court there from an angry mob who was unjustified in their anger. Now, not going to name the poor boy in question, but familiar with the case. Some years before the 15-year-old relative passed away in a motorcycle accident due to illegally parked truck. Some years before that, there was a boy in Kalgoorlie who was 15 years old as well, and who was repairing a motorcycle for his friend, and by the looks of it has taken it for a test ride and gone into the reserve in Kalgoorlie, where he was chased down by men in a four-wheel drive and run over from behind in a terrible crime. The man in question was a member of a Facebook group that was threatening to kill their BCs. Those are racial slurs that are being censored. The little BCs, they said, for theft of motorbikes in the area, which were, by the way, not everyone was doing, was multi-ethnic, and that boy had not done. The man in the four-wheel drive suspected it was his bike, which he claimed, which had been stolen a couple of weeks earlier. The boy in question was the one that was training up to become a mechanic's apprentice when he left school by fixing his friends' bikes. He's dead now. Hate thy neighbour is telling your neighbour who lost a relative of the same age in a motorcycle accident that a different boy of the same age who experienced such a horrendous end deserved it. The callousness of such a statement was unconscionable. for the past year since then, I've been trying to communicate to him, trying to say, apologise. And in more recent months, mentioned the mother's name, the mother of the boy who died because of an illegally parked truck. The relative didn't want to say that person's name to that piece of shit before that, due to the enormous insult of that behaviour. And to make matters worse, a few weeks after coming up and saying that, he started to say that the Holocaust was made up and that Jews had received $150,000 in cash money to make it up. The ex-husband in question grew up in the USSR, in a country littered with the concentration camps that Hitler put there. And had a grandmother who was the descendant of Latvian Jews. Who was directly traumatised as a consequence of growing up seeing tanks roll down his street during the latter days of the USSR, and with traumatised ancestors, parents and grandparents, an entire country and region trying to clean up after that, who had wandered through the forests of his home village where he was told not to tread, and found bodies hanging there, bones hung by cords, with wounds from the Nazis, murder victims of the Nazis hanging in the forest by his village that the USSR had not yet found, similar to how they're still hunting landmines in Cambodia and other places. And that man had the heart to say, "Shut up," to this face when he was told to apologise to that 15-year-old boy on a motorcycle. The one who a week after his funeral had two friends from his neighbourhood of the same age hunted down and chased by a madman, and one of them died similar to the boy in Kalgoorlie. But he still hasn't apologised to this face on behalf of that boy's mother. That is hate thy neighbour.